Hey, it's Aaron, metal theologian. All right, we're going to piss y'all off today, too, because I'm going to talk about the difference between speed metal and thrash metal and why there actually is none. And I'm actually deliberately wearing my metallurgy shirt because they might catch some strays, too. Because people love to argue about that kind of shit. And I don't know, I want to say I think it's silly or I think it's pointless. I actually find it really entertaining because people are trying to articulate these ephemeral things, and it's kind of fun to watch. And and of course it's fun to hang out in the metallurgy chat and they're talking about thrash metal records. Say, oh, I thought that was more of a speed metal record, Anyway, we got a soda here though. We're gonna talk about this first. This is Mole Cola, which I figured was gonna be like mole, like in Mexican food or something like that. But it's a classic Italian cola. I mean, it even has the flag on the cap there. So I don't really know what to expect. I mean, it's probably going to be pretty cola-y. I have my mounted, fuck, it's hard to reach from here. There's a mounted bottle opener on the side of this cube, though, if you haven't seen this before. There we go. Alright, so we're going to give this bad boy a try. I've never seen this before, never heard of it before. So, we're going to see if it's any good. It's not that sweet. I mean, it definitely has sugar in it, right? It's sweet. It's still a cola, But it's not like a big sugar bomb like you sort of expect, like with, a Pepsi or something like that. It has a really sort of thin taste to it. It says, Mole Cola in mountain spring water on it. And I kind of feel like you could get a little extra of that mountain spring water because it's kind of light, but it's funny because it feels really heavy on your tongue. You know what I mean? It's like there's a sort of tartness to it that kind of penetrates your taste buds and stays there. It's an undertone that's almost sour, but I wouldn't call it sour. I mean, it's definitely a sweet drink, but it definitely has more sort of that tartness than I would expect out of a cola. Here's one more sip here. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't drink this all day long. It's not really a favorite. I wouldn't call this top tier, but it's interesting. I mean, I'll finish it, As of right now, there are only 2 sodas that I wasn't able to finish. And one was, like a sugar cookie seasonal one, which was disgusting. And then another one was actually one of those, flavored Cokes that they had for a while there with, the weird names like Galaxy Flavor or Rainbow Flavor. And it was, perfume flavored Coke or something. It was terrible. I couldn't finish that one either. But this one's definitely not going to make it to that list. So right now we're listening to a record by Juhani Aaltonen because I'm kind of into the I don't know, I felt like hearing some jazz, man. I started thinking about how good these fucking Finnish bands were. I found there's been a reissue of a Heikki Sarmanto record that I don't have, so I sent away for that, and I was like, oh well, shit. I had to bust some of these bad boys out and spend a little time with them. So yeah, I got a few other things here too. A couple Finnish ones, a non-Finnish one. Let's talk about the metal thing first, okay? So there's a lot of discussion that happens. I see a lot of people spending a lot of time talking about what's thrash metal and what's speed metal. And, from my own perspective, just sort of give you where I'm coming from, because I spent a lot of time, let me preface by saying this, I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out what the fucking difference is between thrash metal and speed metal, right? They're both fast, it's not, to me, in my head, speed makes me think more like sort of just fast, you know what I mean, and precise, whereas thrash is maybe sort of rougher and sloppier, you know what I mean? So in my head, I've always thought of Kill 'Em All by Metallica as being a true speed metal record, because part of it's just the thin production of that thing. It just sounds really clean. I mean, it sounds muddy kind of too, but within that sort of it sounds like the playing is clean and crisp, and really different from sort of the violence of the first Slayer record, Show No Mercy. But like I've definitely been in like sort of chats or forums, and people are saying, "Oh well, to me, Metallica, Kill 'Em All is more of is a thrash metal record, and Show No Mercy is more of a speed metal record." You know, I'm like, oh, so maybe I'm wrong. You know, and I spent a lot of time trying to figure this out, but I've finally gotten to the point where I'm pretty well convinced that no two people actually completely agree on what these terms mean. And that it's kind of useless to try and draw a distinction between the two. And that really sort of goes back to what I think is, what language is for, because, I've talked here before about how, terms of rock terminology has changed, you know what I mean? Like in 1985, black metal was like creator and destruction. It's funny, I disagree with some people in the community about this, but like in the circles I ran in, like you had those first two Running Wild records too. Some people don't consider those part of it, but I kind of do, And people call that first wave black metal now, but it really has no relationship to the stuff that started coming out in Norway, 8 to 10 years later. Other than the fact that those guys were listening to it and trying to one-up them, you know what I mean? I really kind of see black metal like from, we're starting with like, the Mayhem, Emperor, Burzum, that sort of era, like that on, that it's really just a different genre of music. And I don't really listen to that stuff anymore, but when I did listen to it and I got into it by listening to it as something separate from metal. Because like previously, I took me a long time to develop any appreciation for that shit at all. And I really think that it's because I was trying to listen to it as metal, like bringing in my presuppositions about what metal would sound like, you know what I mean? And that means certain things like, riffs, a certain sort of, grandiosity most of the time, and they don't have any of that, you know what I mean? It's like you listen to like Dark Throne and like there's no treble, there's no bass, there are no riffs. It's just like this sort of sound and like this atmosphere. And it's really cool on its own terms. But it doesn't sound like metal to me in the same way that like, Deicide was doing at the same time, I've actually gotten to the point where I feel like I see more in common between Deicide and a band like Dokken than between either of those bands in black metal. You know what I mean? Because even though Dokken is obviously commercial, like corporate shit, which I kind of like, honestly. But, totally like mainstream, pop-oriented and that, and Deicide is like the opposite of all that. There's still these sort of common tropes that they're drawing on that sort of define the sound, and ultimately sort of stake out the ground where their music lives, you know what I mean? And they may be on separate sides of the court, but they're in the same court, Think of like a basketball court or something like that, which is funny because I'm usually not big on sports analogies. So I tend to think that subgenres are kind of shady in the generally speaking, like there are certain terms like, and to go to the language bit, it's because language is useful to the degree that it conveys a certain amount of meaning, you know what I mean? There's something that you're trying to communicate to somebody and you use words to do that. And sometimes there's nuance and that sort of thing is important, and sometimes it's not. Now, one thing about like thrash metal and speed metal, if you tell me that a record's a thrash metal record, you set a certain expectation in my head. Now, if you tell me it's a speed metal record, you pretty much set exactly the same expectation in my head. It's going to be metal, it's going to be fast, it's going to sound like, like late 80s, early 90s stuff. If it's more modern, it's still going to be like drawing from that well, you know what I mean? And, but if you say, well, this one's a thrash metal record, this one's a speed metal record, I don't doubt that there's a distinction there in your head. I just don't really believe that it's the same distinction that anyone else draws in their own heads. You know what I mean? I give you an example of how I see those sorts of things. You know what I mean? I mean, another example is in my household, like hanging out with my kids, we use the word dank a lot. I don't really remember how that came about. It was like, I think one of the kids said it once. They like saw it online somewhere, and I thought it was funny that they said that. So I started saying it, and they started saying it more, and it sort of became this loop. And I mean, obviously, dank has like a real meaning, right? Like soggy and kind of unpleasant, generally speaking, right? Then there's like the sort of slang meaning, which is more like dank. Like, I mean, usually we talk about weed, right? But specifically, dank being a good thing, okay? Well, in our sort of parlance around the house, the word dank has kind of taken on more meaning than that. It's come like when we refer to something as dank, we can sometimes use sort of general terms, but generally speaking, it'll be something that's funny or awesome, but stupid. You know what I mean? And often funny or awesome because it's stupid, and it's like so stupid that like if you actually did that, it would be dank. You know, it's like for instance, Spencer one time when he was like he got a flat or something when they were driving around, and so they were driving with a donut, and I was like, you know, it would be dank if you just put 4 donuts on the car and just drove around like that. You know, that's the sort of thing that dank is. It sort of communicates. You know, I mean, obviously it'd be a stupid thing to do, but it'd be really funny and kind of pointless, and like that's what makes it dank. You know what I mean? Now, if I'm talking to, you know, you watching this, or I've kind of gotten Eric Bauer say this to a certain degree too, like when I use the word dank, I may mean some extra things with it that don't necessarily get through, but there's still meaning that's conveyed there. You know what I mean? And that's what I think is happening with the thrash and the speed metal. You know what I mean? You may mean these extra 2 or 3 like subtle attributes, but it's still meaningful when you communicate it to me because it still sets a certain expectation about the style of music that I'm going to be listening to. You know what I mean? So why do these different expressions exist? I mean, aside from the fact that people just sort of threw these expressions around, I mean, shit, here's the best example of this that I can possibly bust out. Hang on, I'll get off camera because that's my signature move and show a record. I actually meant to pull this before I started, but obviously I neglected to. Yeah, right here, man. There's no death metal on this record. I don't think I have to convince any of you of that. Not even Hellhammer. Hellhammer's thrashy and sloppy, but I wouldn't call him death metal on this thing. Running Wild still has that kind of evil sound, which is why I sort of, you know, put him in the black metal, the first wave black metal sort of thing with Hellhammer, you know. But you know, it's kind of meaningless. They just sort of said that, right? And so with time and usage, people sort of adopted these terms, I think, and I think to a large degree we sort of created their own definitions about them, you know what I mean? Like death metal came to mean something really specific. You know, if you say something is death metal, then, you know, I know exactly what, well, I don't know exactly what you're talking about, but I have a pretty good idea of what you're talking about, what to expect. You know, even more sort of heaviness, very low, probably a lot of like death metal growls, you know what I mean? And a super high level of musicianship, incidentally, too. With thrash metal and speed metal, I sort of see it like, I mean, it's kind of a Frege thing, like with the whole idea of like the sense and the referent, right? It's like what you're using a word to refer to something out in the world, you know? And sort of like the classic example from philosophy is like the morning star and the evening star are actually the same thing, you know what I mean? You use two different words, you have 2 different senses, but it has the same referent, it refers to the same thing. And that's kind of how I feel like it is with speed metal and thrash metal, you know what I mean? It's 2 different expressions, which again, maybe you have some internalized ideas about, you know what I mean? But ultimately they point to the same thing. But they do point to that thing, which is why they're useful, you know? There are a lot of subgenre names that I hate. There's actually something I struggle with a little bit on my channel too, because like I hate the term stoner rock. I hate the term hair metal. I don't even like that shit. For the most part, I'm pretty hostile to 80s glam. I like 70s glam, like David Bowie and like Neil Merriweather and fucking T-Rex and shit like that. I can hang with that. Even early Elton John I can hang with, you know. But like the 80s glam, you know, the shit that people refer to as hair metal, you know, I don't hate it, and there are a few like real diamonds in that rough too, but for the most part I don't like it. But still, I feel like to call it hair metal is like really sort of dismissive of it in a way that like isn't really fair to the artistry involved in making that music, even if it isn't to my taste, you know what I mean? So the same thing with stoner rock, you know, I think desert rock sounds better, and that's another one where I don't know what the fuck all these different terms mean, like what's the line between stoner rock and desert rock versus, I don't know, psychedelic rock even, you know? But these terms are still useful in that they indicate something specific and they convey meaning to that degree, you know what I mean? So, I don't know. I guess the moral of the story is just remember that the menu is not the meal. We use words to articulate things as well as we can, and words gain their meaning through usage. You know what I mean? The dictionary isn't really the arbiter of word meanings. It's more like it's usage, which is why things change. You know what I mean? Another thing that comes up is in the 1970s, you know what I mean? Why were they calling shit like all this shit that was considered heavy metal back then isn't considered heavy metal now? Like Aerosmith was heavy metal in the 70s, you know what I mean? Now they sound like, a hard rock band that isn't really all that hard. But that's just because the world has moved on, you know what I mean? And now I hear people my age complaining about how people say, "Oh, Iron Maiden isn't." This is a rare one, okay? I've only heard this once or twice. But like Iron Maiden isn't even really a metal band. They're just like hard rock, the metal shit is like stuff that came out in the '90s, like the death metal and the heavier stuff than that. And I'm like, that's just the same thing happening again. You know what I mean? Ted Nugent was metal in the 70s. He wasn't metal in the 80s. Well, in like 1985, I wouldn't have considered looking at a Ted Nugent record looking for metal. You know what I mean? And that wasn't that long after the fact. I mean, he was still active at that point, For all I know, he's still active now. It's like I follow this shit so closely. So, yeah. So I think that's pretty much the end of the lecture there. I'm trying to think if I've forgotten anything important that I wanted to touch on. You know what I mean? I just think it's a real sort of it's interesting to me because it's an interesting case of how people use words to describe reality. You know what I mean? Again, if I could draw on Wittgenstein a little bit here, I'm not claiming any of this is like purely my original shit here. But there's a reality out there is out there, right? And what we say is true to the degree that it corresponds with reality. But those words might mean different meanings in different contexts, and there may be different ways of expressing the experience of reality that aren't necessarily always clear, you know what I mean? Or obvious. Anyway, you can look at a few more records. I put this one on because I figured it might be kind of annoying to the metal guys watching this, but this is actually, I really dig Juhani Aaltonen Among the Finns because it's really freer than a lot of the other stuff that, I guess I'd put that broadly under the umbrella of a free jazz, but it does sound to me more like that sort of like, 60s Blue Note type of free jazz, like what, on records that I wouldn't normally call free, like Andrew Hill and Jackie McLean and people like that, who were sort of making these records that were, new stuff in jazz, sort of aware of the free jazz that was happening around them, but not completely like of that. You know what I mean? There's no like, if you listen to this and you listen to an Albert Eiler record, like, what the hell? We're talking about jazz right now, so I'll fucking show on. Like this fucking all-time classic right here. I mean, this one's very different, See, there you go. What the hell does free jazz mean? It's funny because that expression is like 60 years old now, and it's still and you still hear people calling it like new thing occasionally. I mean, you see that on records, I suppose, more than when people are talking about it, but it kind of feels like, oh, hey, so here's a funny story, actually. It's sort of a little bit of a chuckle at the expense of the fine folks at Brutal Planet, but that's not my intent. I'm not delivering it that way. So I'm just gonna put on this fucking death metal record because it's so good. I can listen to this anytime. The two Running Wild songs on here actually aren't on any of their LPs, unless they redid them like after I sort of checked out. So. It's great stuff. Okay, so here's the story, all right? A few months ago, this is some good speed metal. I mean thrash metal. Actually, I just think it's great metal. Incidentally, I know there's gonna be an inclination among people to be like, oh, what the fuck does this guy know? I would be willing to bet that I've spent more hours of my life listening to metal than you have if you're watching this. There are some exceptions. If you are Scott Waters, then you might have spent more time listening to metal than me, you know? If you are, actually, I'm having trouble thinking of anyone else. But, you know, I've been very deep into metal for a very long time. I mean, I've been collecting this shit I've been collecting records for 40 years now. And metal for most of that time. And I take it in and I digest it real fast. Keep looking for more and more and more, and like, yeah. So if your takeaway from this is, oh, that dude hasn't listened to enough metal, just know, yeah, you're wrong about that one. If you think I'm an idiot, that's fine. I'll let you have that. Okay, so anyway, here's the story. So Scott actually messages me sometimes when there's going to be a new release from a Brutal Planet or a Boone's Overstock or you know, Rocks, those guys. He does a lot of work with that. And they put out good shit. And I don't buy everything, but the shit's always really high quality, and they're great guys to deal with, so I can do it. So a couple months ago, Scott sent me a text. He was like, dude, Brutal Planet is doing this reissue of the Quiet Room album. And it's a fucking fantastic thrash album. It's not a speed album. No, he didn't say that. He said it's a fantastic thrash metal record, but people snooze on it because it was late. You know, it was like 97 or something like that. So I was like, oh, what the hell? So I went ahead and pre-ordered it and kind of forgot about it, okay? So a few days ago, I get a pack in the mail, and this is in it. It's a Quiet Room record, kind of a crappy cover. Like, not one that really screams great thrash metal record to me, right? So, I put this on, sort of going, oh, we'll see if this one, like, you know, blows me away, if it sounds kind of tired, the way I sort of expect later 90s stuff to sound. And, you know, a tired record could still be fun. I'm not going to be mad either way, but I put it on. I'm like, holy shit, this is great. I was, like, really digging it a lot. I was like, fuck, this is good. You know, put it on the other side. I was up really late one night, and I was texting, actually, with High Definition TV, Eric Bauer, and I was like, dude, this fucking Quiet Room band, you've got to hear these guys. They're fantastic. I think you'd love this shit. And I sent a picture of the cover, and he was like, really? I was like, dude, trust me, man, this is fucking really good, you know? And I sent Scott a text saying, dude, you weren't kidding, this record's great. So the next morning I get another text back saying, hey, was this sort of like crossover? Like, you know, metal crossover? I was like, well, I'm disinclined to call it crossover because I don't tend to like crossover, like DRA, Gangrene, that kind of shit really never did much for me. I was like, but it does definitely have some punky vibes, you know, especially in the vocals and that sort of thing. He was like, yeah, dude, I think you got an Eviction record. They fucked up at the pressing plant, and they actually pressed the Eviction album that he's going to be doing soon onto the Quiet Room records. And we just figured it out when we started getting angry emails. So I'm like, well, shit. So I have to go back to Eric and be like, yeah, remember how I was reading about Quiet Room last night? Yeah, it actually wasn't what I thought it was. So it's a pretty huge bummer for the fine folks. Matt at Brutal Planet, salute for putting up with this kind of shit. You're doing the Lord's work, because I would not want to have to clean up this mess. This record might be very good. I actually don't know yet, but I went and looked for Eviction. Well, they actually put an announcement saying they're going to be doing this. And I didn't think I'd ever heard of Eviction. I actually recognized the cover art sort of like way back in the back of my head. I went, yeah, that's one that I definitely would have passed right by because it looks like crossover, you know? So it's like, it looks too punk for me. So yeah, so I would never have known, but like it turns out I really like Eviction. So it's funny, I heard the Eviction guys were kind of mad about the fuck up, and you know, it's annoying for them too. In a way, I don't blame them, as long as they're cool about it, you know. But I don't blame them. But like, they shouldn't be mad because like they just got a new fan through deceptive marketing, arguably. Except that it was, you know, everyone was acting in good faith. It was just a mistake, obviously. So yeah, I'm the butt of that joke because I was like, I thought I just discovered this great new fucking band. I was like, holy shit, I can't believe I never heard this before. And it turns out it wasn't what I thought it was. It was just like something completely different. And not only that, but I might have to like start thinking about whether I should reevaluate some of that crossover shit that I wrote off 30 years ago, because if I like this one so much, maybe DRI isn't as bad as I sort of remember them being in my head. You know what I mean? I know a lot of people in the community like them. They're pretty well regarded. Gangrene probably less so. There are a couple others that, those are always the first two that come to mind, but I don't know, COC, do they count? Corrosion of Conformity? I really like their like stoner doom shit, and there's the fucking label again, right? All right, what other records do we have? Nah, you know, so I'm not going to talk about it. I was going to talk, okay, Oli Avenlati. Sort of the other end of the spectrum from Juhani Aaltonen, because this is like kind of cheesy when it comes to like the Finnish jazz shit. But I really like it, man. It took me a couple more listens to get into this shit than into the other one, but I like this too. Actually, this other record of his is even cornier. Yeah, this one. It's pretty corny, but I really like it. Look at him, man. How can you get mad at that guy, you know? Yeah, it's funny. I have a few other things here that I've been playing a lot, but I'm kind of working on a couple other sort of little video ideas. So, busted out this one, actually. Fucking showed this off. I just played this earlier today. Not a very heavy record, but a really good record. I really like the songs on this. I actually got this at Aquarius Records in San Francisco, and it cost next to nothing because it was the 90s. I think I paid $4 for it. And I actually already had it on CD, so I upgraded it to the vinyl back then. And I'm really glad I did. This is one of those records that I like. At first it was like not as heavy as I expected, but with a couple more listens it really started to grow on me. And yeah, like I said, I love the thing now. And here's another one that I pulled out, actually. Fucking Rocky Erickson. And specifically this era. I know there are a couple different... These songs have been packaged a couple different times, a couple different ways, but it has like Two-Headed Dog, I Walked with a Zombie, Don't Shake Me Lucifer, great song, Night of the Vampire, Bloody Hammer. God, I just read all the fucking songs on side one except for I Think of Demons. It's just all breakers, breakers, bangers, man. Fucking every song on this thing is great. What a funny band photo, too. I said a bitch about band photos, but if your main guy has a cane and like this guy looks like that, I can cut you a little slack. All right, last one here. This is a record I got because someone in the comments section recommended it, which is why I'm showing it. So this is a band called Evidence. It's actually, I think it's a DJ. It might be a couple guys. I don't even know. I'd heard of Evidence. I was sort of aware. Didn't really know where to start. Someone said, "Hey man, get Unlearning Volume 2. It's really good." So I was like, "Okay, shit." So I saw this at the local shop, grabbed it. It's really good, man. And you know something? Actually, this has a really cool die cut too. I'll show this. It's not on the cover. Look at that. You see that? I've never seen that before. It's so simple, but just so cool, you know? So there we go. Evidence is awesome. I'm really liking Evidence. I'll probably be checking out some more, too. Hey, you know something? I'll show you one more, too. This is a reward if you, like, stayed all the way to the end of the video, okay? I've talked a lot of shit about this record over the years. But I said a few videos ago that maybe I should reassess some of the, post space rock era Pink Floyd records, basically like Dark Side On is really what I'm thinking of. And a friend of mine gave me this, a local friend of mine. This is actually the first time I've owned this record, I think. It's possible I had one for like 10 minutes back in the 90s, but I never liked this record. I'm kind of digging this, man. And one thing I think I appreciate about this band a lot more than I did when I was younger and not really liking these records, like this one, Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here. Those are kind of the ones that people rave about that have always left me cold. But the one thing I really got to hand it to Pink Floyd for is that they really had their own sound. You know, there's really no other band that sounds quite like how they sounded on this. And that's a really hard thing to do, given how many, like, thousands and thousands of bands there have been, especially rock bands, you know, over the last several years. So, to be able to pull that off is pretty impressive. Like, even if I didn't like this record at all, I'd have to give them some pretty serious props for that. But I think I do like this record. I need to listen to it a couple more times. We're going to report back. But yeah, the metal theologian starts listening to fucking Pink Floyd records that aren't like the weird early ones that are hip, right? Yeah, that might be something. Or else maybe I'll just go on another big jazz kick and I'll just talk about nothing but jazz next time here. So I have some Jeff Gilson records here that I kind of want to bust out. But we'll save that for next time. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope all that language shit made sense. But this is the sort of thing I think about a lot. It's interesting to me, like how language works, how it changes over time, and how meaning is actually conveyed through language. So, all right, take care. Thanks for watching.